Have you ever wondered why even knowing the damage it causes, so many people continue to turn to alcohol? Not just for pleasure, but as if they were running away from something they can't name. Carl Jung said that human beings cannot bear the emptiness of the unconscious, and so they create distractions. But what happens when that distraction becomes a silent ritual of spiritual self-sabotage? When a glass becomes a veil covering the pain that could set you free? What if I told you that every sip you take doesn't dissolve your problems? It dissolves you, not your body, but your soul. Jung saw alcohol as a symbolic block, a liquid barrier between being and becoming. Because there is no inner growth when the soul is intoxicated, there is only stagnation, repetition, escape. The search for transcendence turns into anesthesia. The thirst for truth becomes torpor. Imagine that you are on the verge of individuation, about to discover who you really are, but something holds you back. Something subtle, invisible, intoxicating. It is not alcohol that holds you back. It is what it hides. The pain you have not faced. The shadow you refuse to integrate. Jung saw alcohol as an unconscious pact with unconsciousness. A silent agreement that it is better not to remember, better not to feel, better not to wake up. But what if it is costing you your soul? Because alcohol, according to Jung, is not just a substance. It is a symbol. And like every symbol, it has two sides, one that reveals and one that blinds. The question is, what is it blinding you to? For Carl Jung, the greatest poison is not the one that kills the body, but the one that silences the soul. And alcohol, in his symbolic and psychological perspective, is not just a social habit or a recreational substance. It is an unconscious mechanism for suspending the self. A short circuit between the being we are and the being we should be becoming. Because the path to individuation requires lucidity. It requires pain. It requires presence. And everything that distances us from this presence acts as a spiritual block. Alcohol, more than any other modern escape, represents a desperate attempt not to see what needs to be seen, not to feel what needs to be felt. Jung observed in his patients that alcohol was not just a moral problem. It was above all a spiritual symptom. He said that many people drink not to be happy, but to numb themselves. Not to celebrate, but to escape. And this escape comes at a high-priced disconnection from the self, from the essential core of the psyche. That inner spark that, according to him, leads us toward wholeness. When that connection is broken, we lose our center. We become disconnected fragments, hostages to primitive impulses. We come to exist as masks, as social ghosts, smiling on the outside and dying on the inside. Alcohol interferes in this process in a subtle and devastating way. By altering the state of consciousness, it fragments the integration between the conscious and the unconscious, exactly the opposite of what the individuation process proposes. Instead of integrating internal opposites, alcohol creates a chasm between them. Instead of confronting the shadow, it intoxicates it. Instead of listening to the call of the soul, it drowns it out with noise, euphoria, and momentary illusions. Jung said that when we do not listen to the unconscious voluntarily, it screams. And alcohol is one of the ways the unconscious finds to protect itself from itself. Many people say they feel freer under the influence of alcohol, that they become braver, lighter, more sincere. But Jung warned everything that is accessed without consciousness comes at a price. This courage is not real, it is compensation. This lightness is the absence of tension, but also the absence of presence. This sincerity is a breakdown of the ego filter, and without a structured ego, what emerges is not truth. It is lack of control. It is not self-knowledge, it is chaos. And more serious than all this, Jung observed that alcohol weakens the symbolic field of the psyche. It breaks down the archetypal structures that sustain the individual on their inner journey. In energetic language, it creates cracks in the vibrational field, holes through which not only vital force escapes, but also spiritual direction. When these gaps open, the soul becomes vulnerable. And it is in this state that repressed internal forces as well as subtle external influences find their way in. This is not about moralism, it is about structure. The structure that allows a human being not to lose themselves while going through the inevitable pains of existence. Jung believed that much of humanity lives intoxicated, even those who do not drink. Intoxicated by distractions, noise, false images. But alcohol has a peculiarity: it accelerates this numbness, offering a simulation of transcendence. That is, why he said alcohol is so attractive. Because it touches on a legitimate desire, the thirst for liberation, but responds with illusion. It promises freedom, but delivers dependence. It promises light, but ignites a fire that burns without illuminating. In his studies of alchemy, Jung explored the symbols of the transformations of matter as a reflection of the psychic journey. And within alchemy, alcohol was called spirit, the spirit that separates itself from matter, the volatile extract. And Jung saw a dangerous metaphor in this. Because this spirit, when separated from its essence, does not illuminate, it seduces. It becomes a mirage, a glow without substance. And this is exactly what alcohol does to the psyche. It offers an illusion of elevation when in fact, it dissolves the foundations of self-knowledge. That is why so many spiritual masters in different traditions speak of the importance of purity, not as a moral rule, but as vibrational clarity. Jung did not preach abstinence. He preached awareness. He understood that a person's relationship with alcohol revealed more about their inner state than about the substance itself. And that is why he said that all addiction is a clue. A message from the unconscious saying, there is something inside you that you don't want to feel. And if you don't want to feel it, you will never find yourself. The path of individuation requires courage. And courage in the Jungian sense is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to go through fear with lucidity. Alcohol blocks. This passage, it cuts off the connection with the self. It interrupts the flow of the true inner calling. And that is why so many seek answers but remain empty. Because the glass may be full, but the soul is dry. Carl Jung observed that alcohol not only interferes with the mind, but with the entire symbolic field that sustains the psychic life of a human being. And where the psyche is silenced, the soul begins to sicken. The soul sickens in silence. Not because the body becomes intoxicated, but because the spirit begins to drift away. What was once a legitimate desire for transcendence, for peace, for reconnection, becomes noise. And where there is noise, there is no listening. The soul cries out, but no one answers. In his studies, Jung associated individuation with the ability to sustain tension between opposites. The conscious and the unconscious, good and evil, desire and renunciation. But alcohol erases the extremes. It creates a false balance, a narcotic middle ground where everything seems bearable, everything seems resolved, everything seems light. But it is a hollow lightness. Because there is no presence, there is only forgetfulness. Forgetting is easy. Remembering requires courage. And remembering what the pain. Yes, but also the purpose, the calling, the emptiness that exists not as a mistake but as space for transformation. Jung said that emptiness is fertile when viewed with awareness, but when we fill it with substances, distractions, or automatic habits, it becomes a prison. Alcohol then becomes the guardian of the cell, the key to false escape. And the more we drink, the less we feel. The less we feel, the less we live. And the less we live, the more we need to drink to forget that we are dying inside. Alcohol acts as a spiritual anesthetic. It prevents the soul from listening to itself. It dulls dreams, symbols the signs of the unconscious. It transforms the ritual of self-knowledge into a theater of empty repetitions. The soul tries to speak but is interrupted by sips and forced laughter. The self, the regulating center of the psyche, according to Jung, retreats. And the ego without guidance wanders in circles. It confuses euphoria with freedom. It confuses the absence of pain with enlightenment, but no true light is born from numbness. Jung warned that alcohol destroys the bridge between the inner and outer worlds. It blocks the channels of symbolic expression. Dreams cease to come, insights disappear, intuition fades. In their place, doubt arises, a dry emptiness, a sadness that has no name, and the cruelest thing, the normalization of this state. We come to believe that living disconnected is normal, that not feeling is normal, that this absence of meaning is the price of maturity. But it is not. It is a symptom of inner abandonment. Alcohol, in this view, is the clearest sign that something has been lost, that something inside us is trying to escape from itself. And the more we run away, the further we distance ourselves from the source, from our center, from that spark that, according to Jung, never disappears, but can be forgotten. And when we forget who we are swept away by the currents of the collective unconscious. We repeat familiar patterns, we recreate traumas, we hurt as we were hurt. Because we are not present, we are too busy trying not to feel. But the soul does not disappear. It waits. It waits for you to stop, for you to listen, for you to have the courage to look inside, to ask yourself with brutal honesty, what am I trying to avoid? What is it in me that hurts so much that only alcohol can silence it? And could it be that what I am calling relief is not just a pause in the pain that still awaits me when the effect wears off? Individuation is the process of remembering who you are behind everything you have learned to pretend to be. It is walking toward your wholeness. And that wholeness includes your pain, your shadow, your fears, your failures. Jung never said it would be easy, but he did say it would be real. And reality, even when difficult, is the only soil in which the soul can flourish. Alcohol prevents that flourishing. It sterilizes the soil of the soul. It promises relief, but steals depth. It promises warmth, but freezes the essence. And that is why it is not just a drink. It is a symbol of what we choose when we fail to choose ourselves. The glass that is raised at parties often hides a soul that is falling apart inside. And the toast, that common gesture, can be the rite of passage to another meaningless night, another morning of regret, another escape disguised as joy. But what if you stopped now? What if just for today you decided to feel? No crutches, no shortcuts, no numbing. What hurts? No stifling what throbs. Jung said that the first step toward transformation is recognizing what is sick. Only then does healing become possible. If this content resonated with you, if any part of you felt recognized in these words, comment below. You don't have to justify anything. Just write, I recognize. Because healing begins with recognition, and the next step, perhaps, is already within your reach. Carl Jung said that the soul is like a seed buried in the soil of the unconscious. It wants to grow. It wants to break through the layers of fear, pain, and conditioning. But to do that, it needs light. And alcohol, according to him, extinguishes that light. It creates an artificial night within the psyche. A warm darkness where the soul falls asleep, not because it has rested, but because it has been intoxicated before it could wake up. It is a deep sleep, but not a regenerative one. It is a sleep that paralyzes individuation. When a person makes alcohol a habit, they begin to build a psychic detour, a shortcut. Instead of crossing the inner desert with lucidity, they begin to circumvent everything that is uncomfortable. Pain becomes something to be avoided, not understood. The inner silence becomes unbearable, and the mind, increasingly noisy, cries out for relief that only alcohol seems to bring. But Jung warned everything you avoid today will return tomorrow with greater force. The ignored shadow does not disappear. It accumulates, and one day it swallows you. This swallowing does not happen violently. It happens with exhaustion. First, you lose the will to grow, then to feel, then to question. And before you know it, you are living on autopilot, accepting emotional crumbs, justifying your stagnation as maturity, but it is not maturity. It is evasion. And alcohol, with its numbing effect, becomes the symbol of this pact with escape. Jung said that every addiction is an unconscious ritual of spiritual sacrifice. You give up your connection with the self, that spark that could guide you, in exchange for fleeting moments of peace. But there is no peace without truth. There is no peace without confrontation. And alcohol, by offering false peace, distances us from the only true source of healing, consciously confronting who we are. On a subtle level, Jung claimed that alcohol tears apart the individual's vibrational field. It opens cracks through which everything that does not belong can infiltrate. Thoughts that are not yours, feelings that do not come from your essence, influences that little by little push you away from yourself. And the further you are from yourself, the more fragile you become, more prone to repeating patterns, more inclined to sabotage yourself, and more susceptible to believing that there is no way out. But there is. It never disappeared. It was just forgotten. It is exactly where it has always been, in the center, in the self. In that silent place inside you that does not move with the chaos, that does not change with external approval, that does not need substances to be whole. That place is your anchor, your truth, your real identity. And Jung said that returning to this center is only possible when we stop running away, when we sit in the darkness and say, I am ready to see what everything, the anger you hide, the pain you camouflaged with smiles, the loneliness you drowned with drinks, the neediness you confused with love, the emptiness you tried to fill with parties, the anxiety you masked with euphoria, and above all, the strength that has always been there, suffocated by leaders of silence. Jung believed that individuation is not a clean process. It is a birth. It requires blood tears, confrontation. But it is the only path where the soul becomes whole. And alcohol, by blocking this process, not only paralyzes growth, it delays the incarnation of the spirit. It keeps us in limbo, like loose leaves, rootless, directionless, at the mercy of the winds of the world. When you begin to awaken, something changes. Your taste changes. The ritual that once seemed liberating now seems strange. Drunken laughter begins to sound empty. The smell of alcohol evokes memories of loss, absence, abandonment of self. And that's when you have a chance. The chance to go back inside. To ask, with courage, what am I avoiding facing? And even more, what can I discover when this fog clears? Because behind every impulse to escape, there is a part of you crying out for presence. A forgotten fragment saying, look at me. And that look, according to Jung, is the beginning of healing. Not judgment, not punishment. The look. See, accept, integrate, transform. Alcohol teaches us, through pain, that there is something to be rescued. And if we have the courage to make that journey back, we discover that nothing is lost. Nothing is beyond repair. The soul is resilient. The self is eternal. The connection never went away. It was just sleeping. And now, maybe, it's waking up. Carl Jung said that the soul is not destroyed. It distances itself. And the entire spiritual journey is, in fact, the process of remembering the way back. Alcohol as a symbol reveals where we lost that path. It shows that pain exists, that the need still pulses, that the shadow continues to wait. But it also offers a choice: remain anesthetized or awaken. Awakening is not pretty. It is not easy. It is hard as stone, silent as emptiness, lonely as crossing the desert. But it is real, and everything that is real heals. When you decide to face the pain without disguises, the unconscious begins to respond. Dreams return. Intuition reappears. Life regains density, purpose, meaning. You stop running. You stop fleeing. And for the first time, you begin to walk toward your center. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be ready. You just have to be available. Willing to give up false comfort in exchange for truth. Because as Jung reminds us, only what we face can be transformed. The rest remains a shadow, waiting silently to be seen. If these words have touched you like this video, not out of habit, but as a conscious gesture of someone who chooses light even in the midst of darkness, share it with those you feel are ready to remember. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey from the inside out. Because the soul is not lost. It is just calling. And maybe you have finally started to listen to it.